By the way, did you get to the end of that and write down 1 or 2 or 4 things that you need to change about your fee structure as a minimum? Good, excellent. Because that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to spot ways that we can improve. Sorry, my eldest daughter's just walking past the window. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find ways that you can improve your fees, but not only increase your fees, but also increase the value and perception of your clients. So what I want to do now is I want to go into a piece that which I ended up calling Magnification Mastery, because ultimately in this business, we all spend too much time doing work on a one-to-one basis, whether that's the marketing by going and speaking to people at networking and all that kind of stuff, whether it's nurturing kind of prospects, having multiple meetings with them to try and get them over the line, whether it's then servicing clients, or whether it's how we train our team and how we delegate more to our team. All of those things take up massive amounts of our time. So we need to be constantly thinking, well, how do I do that once, but have it impact many people many times? And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So when I was thinking about this, I thought about a term that, so in the US, they call it a flywheel, but it's about how the difference between businesses like Amazon and businesses like professional services business. Because if you think about why Amazon was so successful, is they started getting customers. So then they put more sellers on there. Then they get more selection. Then, therefore, they're getting better experience. Therefore, they get more traffic. Therefore, they get more customers. Therefore, they get more. And it's a self-fulfilling prophet. It continues to grow and grow and grow. The better it becomes, the bigger it becomes. And the bigger it becomes, the better it becomes again. With professional services, though, there's a slightly different challenge, because what tends to happen is you find more clients. Therefore, you get busy and you give less client attention. Therefore, they get a worse experience. Therefore, you get less clients. Therefore, you get more time. Then you go off finding more clients again. There's a slightly different problem, which I'll come back to in a minute as well. But when I was doing some research on this, and it was actually in a course that I bought a while ago, it kind of talked about the evolution of the professional consultant, and this was not just relating to financial advisors, but business coaches and all sorts. And they said what tends to happen is that people start out as a generalist advisor. And we certainly see this in financial services. To start with, any client is a good client, isn't it? If they've got a pulse, they're a potential client. But the problem is you tend to cap out at roughly an earning potential of about 100,000. Then you end up niching down, and you kind of go, right, okay, I'm going to specialize in retirement plan, or I'm going to specialize in doctors, or I'm going to specialize in inheritance tax, or whatever it is. And you tend to up your earnings potential quite significantly because you become more of an expert, and you end up having a more scalable business. Then what people can do is they can start going into consultancy, and actually, so this is where I think you go from financial advisor to proper financial planning, where you're charging much greater fees to do a much more niche solution. But you're still capped out at a level of earnings. And where I see, and where I first saw Trusted Team was the best way that we could achieve, this in a scalable manner, is to go to group coaching, because ultimately delivering things in a group format allows us to do it once, but to help many, many people. But there is still a sort of a cap on that. I mean, ultimately, you can have a room full of 1,000 people and be coaching them at the same time, but there is still a cap. So therefore, what the advice was, that the digital coaching solution is ultimately the only solution that is, the digital offering is the only solution that is completely scalable. Because if you create a digital course, that course it doesn't matter whether you sell it one time or 1,000,000 times. You've created something, but it's why software as a service businesses are so valuable, because once you've built software, you can sell it 1,000,000 times, and assuming the infrastructure is right, you can it doesn't cost you anymore. And we see this in businesses like Peloton. Peloton took the spinning class, which inevitably is capped at a certain number of people in a room, and went, right, okay, we can sell a product, but we can have 1 million people in a spinning class by creating a solution that takes the boundaries away. And a company called Maven that I kind of discovered it while doing more research on this, did this with health clinic stuff. So that is not only your doctor's appointment, but also adding in webinars and all of those sorts of things. So they're coaching and helping the medical clients on their journey by delivering way more information in a one-to-many approach. And one of the best examples I think of this is TED. So TED talks are born out of a conference that was the TED conference. And in fact, the TED conference started getting criticized for having too many people and becoming too successful. So when they took TED Talks online, they massively expanded their offering, and having TED Talks in the app and everything else, they've massively expanded their offering, but way more people can benefit from those TED Talks now than they ever could before. So we want to be thinking, how can we do something once but impact many, many people? Now, when we go through this process, I want you to be thinking, not necessarily how am I going to do this, but who can help me do this? So I want you to go back to this concept of who, not how, because who can help me do this is usually the better question than how do I do this? And the best example I can give you this is if you listen to the Diary CEO interviewing Simon Cowell. It's a really, really good episode, actually. But Simon Cowell, by his own admission, does not know anything about music. He says, I don't know how songs are made. I don't know how good songs are produced. And I actively make sure that I stick to that, because as soon as I get too involved in understanding of the nuts and bolts of how the music works, I will not be able to sit on the other side of the table and go, that's a hit, whereas that isn't. There's something about that makes it a hit. There's something about that isn't. And it's exactly why. So a couple of weeks ago, we had 0 staff available for the Hub and Spoke. No one was available on a Saturday morning. It's like, okay, so in theory, I'm the only person I could step in and potentially try and play chef and barista. And there's a part of me that's like, I really don't want to be closed for Saturday just because we can't get any, everyone was on holiday, off, whatever. And I was like, no, actually, it's still better that I don't get embroiled in that. And it's better that it closes, because ultimately, actually, I'm better off seeing it as the customer. As soon as you're inside it, oh, well, they're doing that because of this and that. You just get too bogged down. Simon Cowell, interestingly, we touched on this at lunchtime, that Simon Cowell does not own a mobile phone. He never checks emails after 5:30. He takes Fridays off, as well as obviously as the weekends. I mean, I don't know how the weekends work in terms of filming, but he never checks his emails after 5:30, and he does not have a mobile phone. So it's just worth bearing that in mind. You can be that successful and have that big an empire and not need a mobile phone to do it. So what I did was, as in my usual style, I built a framework around creating a one-to-many solution and Magnification Mastery, because there's lots of different ways that you can use this. Loads of different ways you can use this. So, for example, we can use this in our marketing. Now, has anyone heard the story of Jared from Subway? So Jared was this guy here, and he didn't work for Subway, but he decided to go on a diet that involved only eating at Subway. Now, that to me would be, you would think it would be the other way around, wouldn't you? But that Jared went to that Jared by only eating at Subway. So guess what Subway did? Well, this is a good story to tell. And they massively transformed their marketing around the story of Jared. Because if we can use stories, are a brilliant way to magnify what we've done in the past and share it with future clients and prospects and strategic partners. So this is a classic example of a business doing that. And that's why, so if you haven't done the story playbook, if you weren't in the workshop for that, I'd really encourage you to go, well, you'll get it in the email sequence in due course, but do go and do the story playbook, because stories are one of the most powerful ways that you can do this. If you think about it, you could tell us. So I used to tell stories at Efficient Portfolio to the advisors. The main reason was that I wanted those advisors just telling exactly the same stories again in front of their clients. Now, often those were stories about that I'd experienced as an advisor, but that doesn't matter. They can still tell the story as from their point of view. But in the process of marketing, the story playbook is incredibly powerful. You really want to be using those stories time and again. And of course, the most important story is your own story. Why did you get into what you do? We actually just recently did another in the last season of the Business of Endurance podcast. We did another. We did an episode where Claire interviewed me, and then we did an episode where I interviewed Claire. And within that, I told my story, but a kind of like more passive version, more kind of off the cuff version of my story. But we're actually now just going to clip that story and go, well, actually, why would we not put that on the Trusted Team website? Why would we not put that on charlieredding.com? Because actually, it's a more dynamic way of having a story. And it's a good way. I actually heard this talked about at conferences, getting somebody to interview, even if it's not actually a podcast. If you want to create a really authentic story, get somebody to interview you and ask you the questions that will deliver your story, because that is a brilliant message to get out there. And people, as we've heard from Heather, stories are what people care most about. Stories sell. So yeah, you need your expert story. But what you can also do is start building up a marketing Bible. Every time you produce one piece of marketing content, put it in the marketing Bible, because what you'll end up doing is recycling. How many times are you writing something going, oh, sure, I've written something like this before, but where did that end up? Or what was it in? Or so if every piece of marketing you produce, you put into a marketing Bible, brilliant for then recycling that content and using it in multiple ways. But also that marketing Bible is really powerful to upload to your a GPT for your marketing, because then you can upload all of your previous marketing in one foul swoop and go, this is my marketing content. I now need an article on this. And ChatGPT will be way better at delivering you that solution. Of course, seminars and webinars are a brilliant way of going one-to-many. You can tell the story once. The number of times I've got asked, how do you write a business book? Would you do this? How do you do this? So, right, okay, I'll just do a webinar based on how to write a business book. And then every time somebody asks me, I can go, okay, well, that's great. I can just send you this recording. And guess what? It's obviously got a pitch at the end of it. So every time somebody asks, they get a pitch towards the Trusted Team at the end. And the great thing is you can obviously make that evergreen. So if you use a tool called EverWebinar, once it's created, once you've got the recording, you can put that on the website. So essentially, you could be driving marketing to that. And guess what? They go onto the website. If you go onto Trusted Team today, you go, right, okay, that's lucky. There's the Limitless Life workshop starting in half an hour's time. Or I can't even be bothered to wait for that. I'll watch yesterday's version. But it always is about to happen. And so that's just, you do it once, but you can continue to market that. So that could be a webinar that you record, you invite people, those that want to attend live, and that could be on home design or we wouldn't be the right thing for your ideal client, but the 10 mistakes people make or the things that you need to do before you design your property or whatever it is. And then, of course, once that webinar is there, you can keep driving people towards that. Now, it wouldn't be a Trusted Team workshop if we didn't start talking about AI. So I wanted to share with you how somebody has, again, taken this to another level and how they've now linked their AI avatar to doing the discovery call for their business. Now, I don't know how the sound, I think we fixed it. I'm going to just show you the first bit so that you see the guy, and then I'm going to jump forward into the video.
Let's face it, the Turing test has been passed. Ever since ChatGPT came out, you have no idea whether you're talking to AI or to a human. So now we need a new Turing test, which, as Mustafa Salman has proposed, is to see whether AI can make $1 million. And although I do disagree
All right, I'm now just going to
with Mustafa on almost everything, especially on AI safety, I do think that the best indicator of intelligence in the age of knowledge work is the ability to create value within our economy.
Here we go. This is...
Thanks so much, William, for joining. As I said, I'm super excited about your project because most of the projects that we get in our agency are about automating existing businesses, whereas your project is rather about creating an entirely new business with AI. So that's what really got me excited here. And I just wanted to get your perspective on why did you decide to build this entire business using AI rather than going a traditional route and hiring people for it?
Well, it's interesting because I've always built businesses and try to automate them in the past. And usually what you have to do to automate is you get, you delegate it to some people, some contractors, or you get software to do it. But you still had to kind of connect the dots and put it all together. And so there was still work. So you almost semi-automated it. And then you have to kind of monitor it over time. And I was always wanting to fully automate a business for the longest time. And when AI came out, I was like, it's the perfect opportunity. And when I saw your program, the AI Agent Swarm, and how your agents can kind of be customized for different things, that's when I knew this was the time for us to actually try this. So
amazing. Yeah, I definitely agree. Right now we have extremely smart models. Those GPT models, they can perform most human tasks almost on the same level. But where they fall short at the moment is in actually making sure that they actually produce quality outputs at scale. Because, if you ask the GPT model right now to generate a website, it's not going to generate you an entire landing page. It's just going to generate one section and say there you go.
And that, I think that's why I really appreciated what you guys were doing, because your process was, it almost it helped the agents to think, right? And when you're a business owner, you're trying to create this business, you got to think through every step of what you're doing.
But isn't that incredible? You could have a piece of marketing that's driving people to an evergreen webinar. The book's a discovery call. The discovery call is with an AI agent version of yourself. And that AI agent doesn't mind whether it spends 15 hours coaching you into helping you understand the benefit of your offering. It doesn't. They're not sitting there looking at their watch and, Jesus, is this really worth it? They can be doing it to 1,000 people at the same time and closing them. You could have built all of Heather's model into the process, so they're following the same sequence every time. I mean, it is phenomenal, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, so this is great in terms of marketing, but it's also great in terms of accustoming accustoming? I don't know if that's really a word, but anyway, it fit my model. Accustom the prospects that you meet before, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to develop trust, you're trying to educate them, you're trying to take them on a journey so that you're nurturing those people into actual clients. And there's loads of ways you can do this. I mean, Airbnb is great for this. Once you've booked your apartment, you get the host is, they've got a great journey in terms of, right, have you got, there's a keys are still stored in here. Here's the padlock to this. You're paying on this day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how can we use a one-to-many approach to accustom our prospects into our clients? Again, a tool like that AI would obviously be fantastic. Again, seminars and webinars are a great way of sending them stuff to keep them on that journey, to keep them learning more. We did this one on book writing. I know that's something we briefly touched on. You might be interested in this. Having a framework is really important here. I know we've talked about the framework formula, but having a framework here just really helps, because you can start to say, within the Better Future framework, I wanted to send you this bit here because I thought this might be really relevant to you, but I'm only sending you this bit. And of course, the next question in their mind is, but what are the other bits? I want to know the other bits. So a framework formula is really useful in this. And of course, one of the best ways you can use that is in training programs as well. So you might say, like on Kajabi or School, you might send them a free course that will sort of give them a sequence of gradual learning. Obviously, you can do it within your own portal as well. Is that why you're smiling, Nitesh?
I'm smiling because that looks like your AI.
But again, why wouldn't you use your AI to create that? Yeah, yeah, you're right. Actually, the AI looks, yeah, it does. It really does. Did we show you? We did show you my virtual Charlie, didn't we? Yeah. In the K-Zone model, right? So, but having a course, you can send them to go. Like, well, why don't you go through this process? Because everything you do, when you're giving them value, it's bringing them back to you time. And they'll keep going. Wow, they give me this for free. When I start paying them, it's going to be, really powerful. The most important one for me, though, in the professional services sector, because ultimately marketing has to be mostly done one-to-many. The servicing of clients is the biggest game changer. So we introduced a system that, in probably over a 2-year period, reduced the amount of time it took to service our whole client base by 50%. We increased the value that we delivered to clients, and we increased the fee take from the review process. And the problem is that what happens is that advisors, accountants, solicitors, they take on clients, take on more and more clients, and they gradually hit a ceiling. And typically in financial advice, you'd say it's 100 clients. Typically they'll say, once an advisor looks after about 100 clients, they're generally at a ceiling. And then you've got to look at ways that you can break through that ceiling. Because ultimately, if you want to expand the business and you've hit capacity, you've got to do something different. And I think this is the biggest constraining factor in most financial advice businesses, is removing that. Now, of course, you can delegate that to other advisors within your business, but some people don't want to do that. So what we introduced within Efficient Portfolio was the client review workshop. And the client review workshop was, so historically, we were servicing clients on a one-to-one basis. We were seeing them every year, and we were doing a one-to-one meeting with them. We'd do a review pack for them. We'd send them performance reporting and all that kind of stuff. And if the markets were down, you had a conversation with every client about the fact the markets were down. If the legislation had changed, you had a conversation with every client about the legislation changes. So what we did was we introduced the client review workshop. When I heard so David Batchelor was the first person I was aware of to do this in our sector. When I heard him do it, I was like, I can't do that. We do proper financial planning. It wouldn't work for us. And it took me about 4 years of mulling it over before I went, actually, we could do that. It was a game changer for a few reasons. Firstly, it allowed us to deliver way more value, because for some clients, I don't want to get into the market conversation because that's a 15-minute conversation. I don't really want to get into the so I just won't touch on that for some clients because I don't want to be here all day. Whereas when you're doing it one-to-many, you can afford to go into covering much more detail or much more value. We'd do some nice life planning type stuff. We'd do a piece on ethical investing, all the sort of stuff that you felt we probably should be talking about, but we don't really have time to talk about. From a regulatory point of view, it's amazing as well. You can say we invited every client to this workshop. We talked to them about ethical investing, and we said, if you want to get into an ethical portfolio, do so. How can the regulator come back later on and say, well, you didn't give them the option of you've got it videoed, evidence that they have actually been through that process. So from a regulatory point of view, it's brilliant. You say it once, you do it many, many times, so you can go into a little bit more detail. It also encourages you to simplify it to a level that everyone will understand, which is really powerful. It allows you to talk about some of the softer parts of the business as well, like the charity work. We'd always drop in, well, this is what we're doing for charity this year. This is who we're supporting. This is how much we've raised. Again, when would you sit down on a one-to-one basis and tell every client that you've done that? So that's really powerful. It also then allows you to delegate to other people much more easily, because you stand there as the expert saying, this is a good idea. You guys should be doing this. The client will then go, yeah, okay, I want to do that. And I'm happy to see the junior advisor, the paralegal, whatever it is, to go through the process of organizing that, because the expert that they trust has said, this is a good idea. So it allows you to delegate more, allows you to offer new services as well. So, for example, the reason our fees went up as a result of client review workshops was because it gave us an opportunity to re-explain estate planning, so wills and trusts, and not core financial planning principle. But then clients would go, yeah, we want to do that. Great. And we would do them a full review pack beforehand. So they'd come in, they'd have their own bespoke review pack, which is the bit that I was struggling with, which took me 4 years to kind of master. How do we give them their own bespoke lifetime cash flow forecast, but explain it? So they get their bespoke one, but I'm explaining the generic one on the screen so they can see how that translates to theirs. But then we give them a pack that at the end they fill out a form, and we'll have recommendations within there already. So we get them to fill out a form before they come to that, so we know what their changes are. It might be top up your ISA, top up your pension, do a will and trust. All they've got to do is go tick, 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 tick. Yes, I want to do all of those. They walk out the door, then the team leap into action and go, right, we can now just go off and implement all of these things for the client. I have done it. I have said one thing to the whole client base, and suddenly 100 clients might be saying, yes, we want to do that. Absolutely brilliant. What have I missed? Great way for training clients in the process of group learning. And the reason that's really powerful is when we came to sell the business and I wanted to get one consistent message out to the entire client base, everyone was like, oh, it's just another client review workshop. We're used to these. That's great. This is brilliant. So it actually made the sale of the business way easier. It allowed us to get way more of the clients over to the purchasing company. So that made us a more valuable business. It's actually better to create reciprocity. So, for example, some of those client review workshops would give out a book at the start saying, this is a book I read, thought it'd be valuable to you. Create a bit of reciprocity, build into the process referrals. You can mention the power of referrals and give them a form in their form. They can fill that out. There's so many ways this can help you service your clients. And this is what they'll pay a recurring fee for once you've finished. So it might be that you finished a project with them on nutrition, and then you might say, well, look, we do this, we have this program, it's a much lower fee, but you just pay it and you just keep taking a fee from them. And then, of course, where do they come back to when they need more intense help? They'll come back to you and only you, because you're now the person that's in the forefront of their mind. So it really is incredibly, the more you could, and by the way, one thing I didn't mention is, one of the barriers that I had was I thought it was all or nothing. So I thought it was, we do the review process one-to-one, now we do it one-to-many, and that's going to upset some clients. So when we introduced it, what we said is, this is an addition to your client review workshop. This is an addition to your one-to-one review. We do the workshop, and if at the end of that, you want your one-to-one meeting, you just say that on the form and we'll book it all up. But if you've got everything that you need from the workshop and you don't need it, then that's fine. And what we immediately found was about 25% of people didn't take up the one-to-one. The following year, about 50% didn't take up the one-to-one. And then the years thereafter, the 50% would change. Because if a client's had changes in situations or wants to do something different, they'd be the ones that took up the review meeting because they needed it. If they were only coming into the review meeting to see how the markets were doing and whether there's any changes that affected them and get an updated review pack, they were like, well, I've just had everything I need. I don't need it this year. So that's why it allowed us to take more fees in less time, adding more value. It really is. And I really would encourage you to think about how, if you think about all the things you do for a client on an ongoing basis, how can you turn as many of them, if not all of them, into a one-to-many service? Because it will allow you to break through that ceiling so much easier. In terms of the team, it obviously allows you, one-to-many approach allows you to train the team much better. Bill Gates within the, the Gates Foundation, did it, like if you read stuff on Bill Gates, he did an incredible job of creating a team within the Gates Foundation that really empowered them through by educating them once and then having this team that would do incredible things across the planet. We obviously did, sorry, Charlotte, you're probably not going to like that photo, but I picked an outstanding operation, and that was, so that's an example of an outstanding operation of, but just creating a video. It's a good picture. No, there is. But ultimately, like if you're going to train somebody once, video it, and train every person that works for that company thereafter using that video. When we were training up new advisors, we'd get them to do role plays for client scenarios. But of course, we'd record that. And then for the next advisor, before you do any role plays yourself, watch these 3 role plays and listen to the feedback we gave them, because it'll immediately save us a whole load of training time. And then you can use it to empower the team more, so to delegate more. And if you read Principles by Ray Dalio, he does an amazing job of having this kind of really incredible transparency system in terms of really helping people do more with less kind of company oversight, I think is probably the easiest way of putting it. So the things that you can do to empower your team to do more without you, the more of those things you can do, the better. One of the stories I used to love was I saw William Hague speak after he'd been Prime Minister. And he talked about how Tony Blair had the Blair Bible. And essentially what that meant was when they were stood across each other in the House of Commons debating something, Tony Blair was infamous for this massive book that he'd have in front of him. And if somebody mentioned oil, he'd be flicking to O and going, right, yes, but the Tories did this on oil and the Tories did that on oil. He had all of the relevant information in front of him. So in fact, William Hague tells this funny story of how he developed the art of questioning so that he only revealed the topic of the question at the end of the sentence, so that Tony's like frantically trying to get to the right place. But the Blair Bible is how we, help many clients, but through my stories. So we created the Blair Bible, which was everything that we would use more than once. So every time we saw a slide in a presentation, we'd be like, right, that's a useful slide. You know, the financial advisors in the room will have seen this slide God knows how many times. Stick that in the Blair Bible because it's useful for the advisors to come back to it at a click of a button. You know, the emoji guide to investing was something else that was in there. But we had everything from our fee structure to trust frameworks to everything listed in the Blair Bible, so that any time a client went, what about this? The Blair Bible is how that advisor would explain it. It's the same way I would explain it. I'd use the Blair Bible as well. But it would also put some really random things in there. I looked at it again before this, and I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll try it. I used to put a video in to kind of, towards the end of seminars, to boost people's mood before we got to the kind of pitch bit at the end. And I'd put this video in the Blair Bible because I clearly used it quite often. So I thought I'd share it with you. It made me chuckle anyway. Anyway, it carries on. Well, I just happened to see that in the Blair, so I clearly used that a few times because it was in the Blair Bible. She's blowing her nose. But the story playbook, again, another way, using how many times can you use the video text? Why are video testimonials so powerful from a client? Because every time you're doing anything, that can be used to, for example, an advisor might be sitting in front of a client and they're like, yeah, but I'm not sure whether I should use you for my retirement planning. Oh, let me show you a video of what Jeremy said when he used us for his retirement planning. Or, that's those stories, having those all in one centralized place. You go, just look, here you go. This is what somebody said. You don't need to hear it from me. This is what one of the clients said. We'd also use, in terms of performance reporting. So we would get the team to be updating the Blair Bible every quarter. So they just put all the performance reporting, and then any questions at any point would be there at the click of a button. And then finally, the last piece is about recycling. Where can you recycle existing content? So, for example, we took the content that I'd spoken in seminars, and Charlotte turned it into Smart Money. We're taking the content that we've created within the Business of Endurance and turning that into a book. So you want to think about how you can recycle that. Before I get you thinking again, because I'm conscious it's very warm, and get some fresh air, If you do want to take this one to many as opposed to one to one, there are two skills that I would really encourage you to think about. One is, actually it's kind of the one skill really, but it's ultimately one of the best ways you can do this is through public speaking or professional speaking. And so if you want to do, whether that's seminars, webinars, books, telling stories to clients, getting the story out of the client, understanding how you do this, and it is really, really time well spent. And if you want to do that, 3 resources I would share here are, firstly, Talk Like TED is an excellent book in terms of understanding what goes into making the top TED Talks. Brilliant in terms of understanding structure. And then if you want the example of a great TED Talk that fits into that model, watch the Brian Stevenson TED Talk. Really brilliant talk. How to speak so that people will listen. Julian Treasure, he spoke at MDRT a few years ago. I don't know if you remember, Neil, but his TED Talk's also really, really powerful. So understand how you can get that message out better, because it will mean that you have a much greater impact when you're doing one-to-many. The other thing you might want to think about is your public/professional speaking skills. Now, there is a difference. Public speaking is about promoting your business through the mechanism of speaking. Professional speaking is where they're paying for you to go and speak. They are completely different, but ultimately it depends on what you're trying to achieve with your business. Both are great ways of promoting your business. Clearly, I'm doing one of them at the moment, but if I go to speak on somebody else's stage, then I potentially need to be a professional speaker. Not always. What I would say is if you want to learn more about that, if you want to learn more about the public speaking piece, I'd go back and watch the Andy Harrington piece that he did within the Trusted Team workshop. If you want to know more about turning yourself into a professional speaker, so this is not what do I do when I'm standing on the stage. This is the whole business model around how you get yourself on the stage. The lady I would recommend is Maria Franzoni. She's been helping me with my professional speaking side of my business and is absolutely brilliant. But it's all about how you get paid to be on the stage. Out of curiosity, would you like me to line her up as a future guest speaker? Yeah? Okay, great. Victoria, can you make a note of that, and we'll do that afterwards. Okay, brilliant. And then the last piece before I get you doing some work is just something that came out of this and came out of the Stephen Bartlett talk, which is after you employ a PA, the next person you should probably think about employing in today's world, if you really want to do one-to-many well, is a videographer. Now, that videographer can be, somebody in the team that's videoing. It doesn't need, like we have a video here that's being done, but certainly the advice of a lot of the marketeers is the more video content you can create, the more you can do this really easily. I know it's true, and none of us really want it. We've actually, we've just had Victoria's just started working with a video editor, haven't you? That's done, so they've taken a whole day's worth of Trusted Team content. And I think, what did they charge us? 100 and something to turn that into, edit it down and chunk it down as well.